Hello students, today's video lecture is on the posterior muscles. Remember, this is just overview, and I think today you'll get an appreciation of just how many muscles there are that are underneath the ones that we're covering here. So we're looking at a posterior view, and we have muscles A through J. However, some of these muscles are carryovers from the anterior view. So I'm going to go ahead and make a note which ones those are. Muscle G on this side is a carryover from the anterior view. Muscle J we've seen previously, and muscle B. So you'll have an opportunity to figure out in a little while what muscles those are. Let's get started with muscle A. I've colored muscle A green here, and please remember that we have symmetry on the left and right sides of the body here. So this dotted line in the middle represents the boundary between the right side muscle and the left side muscle. This muscle is known as the trapezius. Sometimes people will abbreviate that and refer to it as the traps. This is called the trapezius, and it's peeking over the shoulder. We can see a little bit of it here as well, this muscle. So I'm going to go ahead and label this on the anterior view. So if you ever see it there, you'll know that right next to the deltoid is the trapezius. Okay, the trapezius moves the scapula bone. And so we really refer to that as moving the shoulder, not the humerus directly, but the actual shoulder. So when we look at the grain of this muscle, we get something very interesting. It has a grain in this direction, and in this direction. So like we saw last week, where the deltoid was in 3 sections, the trapezius is also in 3 sections. And so we're going to find 3 different actions for the trapezius, but they're all related to the shoulder, or more specifically, the scapula bone. So this section here, where we're seeing an upward arrow, is when you lift your shoulder up towards your ear. Part of what's causing that to happen is the trapezius. So I put as an action, it pulls the scapula up. Second arrow here, in the center of the muscle, the grain goes towards the midline. And so if we move our scapula or shoulder towards the midline, remember it's on the back side of the body, so it's almost like crunching your shoulder blades together towards the middle. That's actually called adduction of the scapula. And then we have this lowest section that will help to pull the scapula down. Now, you may think, how do you pull your scapula down? It's not a huge movement. It's very slight, but if you are carrying something very heavy on one side and that arm was weighted down like a heavy bag, that moves the scapula down. So in this case, the arrows are very important, and I want you to add them to the diagram so that you can see. So in the app, I just wanted to show you the trapezius. Here's the left side trapezius and the right side trapezius. And if we hide everything else, I know that looks a little strange, and then add back the skeleton, we can clearly see how the trapezius is attaching to the scapula, okay, and also the clavicle. So it really helps to pull that shoulder upwards towards the ear. And then we can see the grain in the center is going to adduct or pull the scapula medially, and then also downward. Let's take a look at the movements. So here we see the upward pull, and we can see how the muscle is contracted here. Say, watch again. Upward pull. See how it's shortening up towards the head. In this view, we can see the scapula is being adducted towards the midline. Okay, back to... Okay, so here's neutral. Shorten it towards the midline, and I'll turn this so you can see a little better. Shorten it towards the midline. This one's showing how the scapula is moving downward. So back to neutral, and this lower section here is going to pull that scapula down. So we see how the muscle's actually shortening in this section. Okay, muscle B. This is a repeat from the anterior side. So what is muscle B? Muscle B is the deltoid. And we know the deltoid moves the arm to the back, that's extension, out to the side, that's abduction, and to the front, that's flexion. So I'm going to leave that one uncolored since we have it on the front, but I do want to show you that on the app. So here's shoulder flexion, and this is the anterior part of the deltoid, lifting the arm to the front. Here's abduction, and that's the middle part, lifting the arm to the side. And here's extension, and that's the posterior part, lifting the arm to the back. Muscle C. Muscle C is on the back of the upper arm. It goes up under the deltoid and attaches to the scapula and some to the humerus. And then I'm going to color a little bit farther. It's going to cross the back of the elbow. So muscle C is called the triceps, and it has the same last name as the biceps, and that name is brachii. Again, it's called the triceps brachii because the upper arm area of the body is known as the brachial region. So it's just a way to know that the triceps is in the brachial or upper arm region. Tri in this case is telling us that it has 3 origin points and then 1 insertion point down on the elbow. So the triceps has an up arrow and it's going to affect the elbow joint. So we'll use the app to demonstrate the action of the triceps, and we see here this is a straightened elbow. So watch as the triceps, let me tip this just a little bit so you can see this muscle is going to shorten and pull in this direction. As the elbow extends, this muscle shortens. So triceps brachii causes elbow extension. Remember, you can write elbow extension or extension of the elbow. Muscle D. Muscle D is the muscle that covers the widest surface area of any muscle of the body. And it comes all the way up here and actually goes under the trapezius right there, comes down the midline, all along the top of the hip bone, and then all the way up again. I'm going to color it on both sides so you can see. Very wide surface area. Now, a lot of this lower section where I'm coloring right here is actually connective tissue, but it's like the tendon part of the muscle. So I'm going to color all the way there, and then the same on the other side, all the way up, attaching to the humerus, down towards the hip. Again, keep in mind that there are 2 sides to this muscle. We have a right part of it and a left part, and so you can use them independently. Muscle D. And this muscle has a pretty fancy name. This muscle is called the latissimus, that means broad, dorsi, which means on the back. So broad on the back, Latissimus dorsi. Many people abbreviate this as being their lats, and it's sort of that bulge under the arm. Latissimus dorsi. This muscle has an arrow that looks like this along the grain. And again, these arrows are important. So I'm going to show you in the app how the latissimus dorsi is able to move the arm. And one of the things we're going to see, notice this arrow goes inwards towards the midline. If we move our arm inwards, we see that it's going to adduct the arm along with some other muscles. So we're looking here at the latissimus dorsi. Let's watch again. Watch as the muscle shortens and pulls the arm inward. Adduction at the shoulder or shoulder adduction. Another thing I want to show you is when I highlight latissimus dorsi, notice that muscle comes all the way to the front of the humerus. That's the insertion point. So as we move the front of the humerus towards the back, again, the arrow hasn't changed, but this time we're moving front to back. Watch as the arm is extended. And I will show you this in this view as well. Okay, so neutral position to do extension at the shoulder, and you can actually watch right here as the muscle contracts, extension, extension. So in addition to doing adduction at the shoulder, it also does extension at the shoulder. It's a pretty important muscle for moving our arm, and it's on the back, so it will move our arm to the back, which is the extension part. Okay, I'm actually going to go out of order for the next two, so please be aware we're going out of order because I think you need to learn F before you're able to learn E. And F, again, a very notable muscle. Most people already know that this muscle is called the Gluteus Maximus. The Gluteus Maximus, gluteal is your butt region, and maximus means largest. What that means is that there's other muscles in the gluteal region. They're just not as large as this. So let's take a look at the atlas before we decide what the action for Gluteus Maximus might be. Okay, so we have kind of a strange view here. It's just a right leg. Here's a front view, but we can't see Gluteus Maximus because it's on the back. So just wanted you to have your bearings. I'm going to turn this towards the side so that we can view this. Here's Gluteus Maximus here. Notice it's attaching to the sacrum and coccyx, a little bit to the hip bone, the ilium, and then it actually comes and attaches back here to the femur, but on the posterior aspect of the femur on the back side. So let's look at a side view so we can get an idea about what this does. We're trying to contract this muscle, and remember, contract means shorten. So as that muscle contracts, what has happened to our leg in reference to the pelvis? That is extension, and it's happening at the hip joint where the femur connects. Okay, so let's watch again. Neutral position, pulls the leg to the back. Oops, neutral position, pulls the leg to the back. Neutral, leg to the back. And you watch right here as that Gluteus Maximus is contracting and shortening to pull the leg to the back. That action is called hip extension or extension of the hip. Gluteus Maximus is actually active in a couple of other movements of the leg, but its primary action is extension of the hip. Now that we've done muscle F, we can move backwards to muscle E. This is another gluteal muscle, and this is the medium-sized gluteal muscle. So we'll start again with Gluteus Medius, telling us it is the middle-sized or medium-sized butt muscle, and then what we can't see is there's a Gluteus Minimus as well. So Gluteus Medius is here on the upper portion of the hip. I'll show you where the connection occurs so you can get a better understanding of that. And that comes all the way down to the outside of the femur. Okay, so here's a front view of our leg again. And we're going to look, I'm going to hide or fade this Gluteus Maximus, and we're concentrating on this one in blue, which is the Gluteus Medius. Okay, so we're concentrating here. Let's watch as the neutral position leg is moved out to the side. And that is in contraction of a Gluteus Medius. So back to neutral. Here's a better angle. Remember, we're talking about this muscle here, highlighted in blue. See how it shortens to pull the leg away from the middle. So we would draw our arrow like this, but you have to understand that arrow means we're pulling the femur out away from the midline. And that action is abduction of the hip, or hip abduction, lifting the leg out to the side. Okay, muscle G is a repeat. So again, I'm not going to color it, and we're looking at the muscles of the inner thigh area. So just here on the inner thigh, it's a repeat from the anterior view. Muscle G is the adductor group. Hopefully you remember that the adductor group is responsible for adducting the leg. That's why they call it adductor. All these muscles here, when you're abducted, they're stretched, and as you contract them, your leg pulls towards the center. So again, most of the adductor group is hidden. We have the quadriceps group here that covers all that up. And from the posterior view, Gluteus Maximus covers most of this up. And then we have another group that comes like this. So all this is obstructed, and all we get is just a little bit of inner thigh, maybe not even that much, just a tiny bit. So the action for the adductor group is adduction. Letter H, one of the muscle groups that's covering up the adductor group. 3 muscles in group H. This first one is behind. So I've colored that to look a little bit, it's actually covered up a little bit. Then there's another muscle of the group that kind of splits it visually, which is why you see 4 arrows instead of 3. These 2 arrows here are pointing at the same muscle. So there's muscle 1, dark purple, muscle 2, lighter purple, and then muscle 3 on this side. And this group is called the hamstring group. The hamstring group. And actually, maybe you're wondering, where did the hamstring come from? Well, it's kind of gross, but these tendons at the back of the knee, here's an anterior view of the leg. These tendons at the back of the knee, here, this section, here, and then over here, when they used a pig leg to make a ham, literally a ham that you eat, they would hold the pig leg up by putting a rod or some kind of a device stick or something underneath those tendons. So they became the strings that hold up the hamstrings. So these muscles here, they put something underneath those muscles to hold up that pig leg while it cures or whatever to become a ham. So while we're here, let's look at the action for the hamstring muscle. Keep in mind, there's the kneecaps. We know it's an anterior view. Here's a posterior or back view, and we'll watch this muscle group shorten, and that bends the knee. That's called knee flexion. Notice this muscle group is shortening, so knee flexion, flexion. And you can see them as the knee flexion happens, the muscle shortens, and then as you straighten the knee again, they're stretching back out. So the action is knee flexion. Muscle I is our last new muscle on this side of the body, with J being a repeat. Muscle I, a lot of people call it the calf muscle. That's not its scientific name. And I'm going to color the entire thing, including the tendon, so that we can see where it attaches. So this tendon on the lower end of the muscle is, we call it the Achilles tendon. It's really called calcaneal tendon because of the heel bone that it attaches to. So this is the insertion at the bottom. The origin is the upper end, and so we get an arrow like this, as we always do with the limb muscles, pulling the bottom part towards the top part. And the name of this muscle is called the gastrocnemius. Gastrocnemius. What a interesting word that is. Gastro means belly or stomach. So this muscle has 2 distinct bellies. This like chunky parts, as you may have noticed. So perhaps that's where the name comes from. So we move the lower part towards the upper part. It's going to pull the heel up towards the back of the knee. So as you move your heel up towards the back of your knee in this direction, it causes plantar flexion. See how the toes are now, they used to be here, now they're down. So planting the toes on the ground or pointing the toes down, the muscle is pulling in this direction. And as it shortens, you can see that it pulls the heel up in reality, which causes the toe to go down. So we can see that that muscle actually comes all the way up past the knee and is anchored here. So the gastrocnemius, and then here's the tendon that attaches it all the way down to the heel. So gastrocnemius extends the ankle, but we know ankle extension is specifically called plantar flexion. And I'm just making a note that that's at the ankle. So heels up, toes down. The last muscle, muscle J, is a repeat. It's sitting at the side of the abdomen. And if we carry over from the anterior view, the side of the abdomen is the external obliques. And so those wrap around a smidge to the back side. External obliques, muscle J. And just as we saw on the anterior view, the action has not changed. External obliques will cause the rib cage on one side to move closer to this section here. So this is actually the insertion, and it's pulled closer towards the origin, which is the midline here. Okay, so let me turn this guy so pelvis is straight forward, using this side, the left side of the body, and it turns the rib cage. So rotation of the vertebral column. So there you have it. The major muscles of the posterior view. Your task now is to complete a quizzes of all the muscles we have learned, including the facial muscles, the anterior muscles, and the posterior muscles. I do want to make a note before we go that this right here, you can see gastrocnemius from the front. So I'm going to make a note that that's the gastrocnemius from the front. So if you see that in your review, you'll know what to do.